Good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our second reopening panel discussion around the reopening of our Guilderland Central School District. I'm here this evening with a wonderful panel of leaders from our school district who have been working tirelessly to flesh out the plan to bring back all of our students safely and to continue their education. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone who is on the screen this evening, and then we'll get started with our presentation. So I'm going to start first with Dr. Damian Singleton. He is our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction. Mr. Michael Piscatelli, our high school principal. Mr. Bob Winans, our Instructional Administrator for Music. Dr. Alan Lockwood, Principal of Guilderland Elementary School. Mrs. Mary Zwaggerman, nurse at Guilderland Elementary School and the head nurse for our district. And our new Director of Health, PE, and Interscholastic Sports, Dave Austin. Welcome, Dave. Our Director of Facilities, Mr. Clifford Nooney. School psychologist from Guilderland Elementary and one of our co-chairs in our reopening committees is Kirsten Idle-Barkman. Principal of Farnsworth Middle School, Mr. Michael Laster. Thank you. Our instructional administrator for ENL and World Languages, Marcia Ranieri. Welcome, Marcia. Our assistant superintendent for business, Mr. Neil Sanders. We also have with us this evening our food services director, Megan Beck. Thank you, Megan. And our director of pupil personnel services, Lisa Knowles. And also with us tonight is our assistant superintendent for human resources, Mr. Regan Johnson. And also on the call tonight is our communications specialist who is working around the clock with all of our communications, Mrs. Amy Perrott. So welcome, everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to take a second here and pull up a PowerPoint, and we'll share some updated information before we begin our Q&A. So give me a moment here. And let me get to the beginning here. All right, so here we are on August 18th, 2020, and we're going to talk about the reopening of our schools in just a couple weeks here. And once again, I'm Dr. Marie Wiles, Superintendent of Schools, and I'm here with the co-chairs of our reopening task force subcommittees. So here's an outline of what we hope to cover this evening. I'm going to ever so briefly just remind everyone of our process for reopening schools, and then hit the highlights of our reopening of schools plan. The bulk of our evening, though, is going to be focused on questions and answers. We had a number of our community members send us questions. We've organized those, and I'll be turning to our subcommittee co-chairs to address them this evening. And then we'll also, if you are watching and new questions come up, you can send them while you are watching to reopening@guilderlandschools.net. We are monitoring that account, and if time permits, we can get to some more questions at the very end. And I'll also remind everyone that we do have a huge and growing frequently asked question document on our website, and we will continue to include information there. So let me start with process. This is a recap really of what I've shared with the community in the past, but we created back in May a steering committee for the reopening of schools. It's been meeting quite a bit. And the work of that committee was substantial, so we determined that it would make some sense to create some subcommittees, and there you have them there. One focused on facilities, another on instruction, another on health and safety, another on social emotional health, another on human resources, and the final one on extracurricular activities, special areas, and athletics. We had over 120 stakeholders who literally gave up a good portion of their summer to help us think through this very complex process. So we're very much appreciative of all of that expertise, time, and commitment. So recently, the activities for reopening, I'm going to pick up kind of where we left off after our July 28th meeting. But on July 31st, the district was required to submit its reopening plan. I'm happy to report that we submitted that plan to both the State Education Department and to the Department of Health in a timely manner. And so far, so good. We have not received any concerns about our reopening plan from either of those agencies. And then just a short while ago, on August 7th, the governor declared that schools in New York State can, in fact, open. And he used a metric that looked at infection rates. And his metric was that if we have an infection rate of 5% or less on a rolling 14-day average, schools can open. And as you can see, as of today, that infection rate is actually 0.8%. By the way, in Albany County itself, subset of the capital region that we typically use, Albany County today is at 0.4% in its infection rate. The other end of the governor's metric about when schools would close is if the infection rate goes over 9% using a 7-day average. So that, of course, is one of the metrics we will certainly be keeping our eye out on. When the governor announced that schools could open, he asked school districts to make sure we made 3 elements of our reopening plan prominent. One is on remote learning, one is on COVID testing, and the other is on contact tracing. So if you were to go to our website right now, they are on those 3 elements are linked right to the front page. We'll be talking about all 3 of those this evening as well. And then the governor also reaffirmed the importance of communicating with our publics. So he asked that we host 3 informational sessions for parents by the end of this week. So we have tonight's program, we have another at tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the third one is on Thursday at 7 p.m. And all of these sessions are essentially the same. The questions that we get in from our community might vary a bit, but that's the plan. And then finally, the governor asked that we host an informational session for our faculty and staff, and that will be happening here in Guilderland at 2 p.m. tomorrow. So just a recap of the principles that we used as we decided, made many decisions. But first and foremost, we wanted to adhere to state level guidelines and ensure the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. That is our top priority. But we also wanted to maximize instructional opportunities for all students. But we've prioritized in-person instruction to our youngest learners and those who might need some additional assistance. And then lastly, all of this has been done with flexibility in mind. We will likely need to adjust our plan due to changing conditions associated with the virus, but also with challenges that emerge as we flesh out the details of the plans. And I suspect that will continue into the next several weeks. So I want to start with our top priority, which is health and safety. And the primary starting point for our whole plan was the whole notion of social distancing. And the metric that we received in our state ed guidance that we needed to make sure we had 6 feet of space between our learners. And that metric really was the foundation of all of the subsequent decisions we needed to make about how to bring our children back to school. So just to say a little bit more about that, when we base a 6 feet of space between individuals in classrooms, that translates into approximately 14 students per classroom, and that's a 750 square foot classroom. The number of students can be higher in our larger classrooms. We have classrooms that are as high as 1,000. We even have a classroom that's 1,500 square feet. So we may go a bit higher than that because we have the space. Just keeping in mind that the 6 feet is the key piece there. However, when it comes to physical education and music, and particularly singing and the playing of wind instruments, we've been recommended to plan for 12 feet of space between individuals. Also, along the line of social distancing, we've looked at signage for our maximum capacity for smaller spaces within our facilities, like break rooms and restrooms. We have signage reminding people about keeping their distance in areas of potential congregation, and we're using directional arrows to help our students and our staff know which direction to go in each side or each part of a hallway. And this is, of course, tied to our fire safety and evacuation plans. Another big part of our safety plan is face coverings. And as we've pointed out in the past, they are to be worn at all times by students, staff, and visitors when 6 feet can't be maintained. And students will only be allowed to remove face coverings during meals and for short mask breaks. Those mask breaks will be managed largely by their classroom teacher during instruction, when students can in fact maintain 6 feet of space and there's no need for children to come closer than that or for the teacher to come closer in order to assist. If that's the case, then individuals will need to keep their masks on. We encourage families and our staff to, if they choose to, bring their own face coverings, but we have plenty of PPE to provide students and staff face coverings if they need it at no cost. I want to say a couple things about acceptable face coverings, because not all face coverings are created equal, but acceptable ones include cloth-based coverings and surgical masks. And the important thing is they have to cover both the nose and the mouth. They need to fit well so that you're not constantly adjusting them. But bandanas, single ply, gaiters, and masks that have an exhalation valve are not acceptable. So parents, if you're out there purchasing masks, please don't purchase those kinds to wear to school. They simply are not effective enough. One of the questions we get again and again is, what if a child refuses to wear a mask? And I just want to say a couple words about this. All of what we're trying to do here to keep our children and our faculty and staff safe has to do with modifying behavior and making sure that we are practicing behaviors that not only keep ourselves safe, but all of our colleagues and peers. So if a child refuses to wear a mask, we will do what we always do when a child doesn't exhibit the appropriate behavior. We'll have a conversation. We may call a parent. We may, provide encouragement to wear a mask. But the bottom line is that our child does need to wear the mask. So if it becomes problematic that they are unable to wear it, we may need to look at some approaches that, maybe the child needs to be in a remote setting. But it is so important for everyone to wear a mask in order to keep everyone safe. But that is a last resort. We want to work with people to develop the behaviors that will be mindful of everyone around them. Another part of our health and safety is a daily health screening. We have in the works a daily health screening attestation. This will be something that all faculty, staff, and students complete each day. We will be sending out a link through School Messenger. Faculty, staff, and students can pick whether they want this in a text, an email, or a phone call, but a reminder to log in to answer 4 or 5 questions. And then if the answers to all of the questions indicate that you're in a healthy spot to come to school, the phone that you're using will turn green, meaning come on into school. Students who don't complete the screening at home, and this is the same for staff, that screening will have to be done at school. This will be difficult. I'm encouraging everyone to be partners with us in this work, because it will take time for adults in the building to track down the students who haven't completed the screening process. So please help us in this matter. We're hopeful that the reminder will assist in the morning, and it only takes a few seconds. We're doing a variation of this with all of our staff right now. And then if any staff or student member with signs of COVID-19 has signs of the virus, they will be assessed. We have a designated isolation area in each of our buildings and sent home for follow-up with a healthcare provider. It is the healthcare providers who will ultimately be making diagnoses about the symptoms that are being exhibited. And along that line, COVID testing will be done by a healthcare provider or at a designated Department of Health testing site. I know the governor at one point mentioned that schools would be doing testing. At this point, schools are not in a position to do COVID testing, so we will be reaching out to our medical professionals to assist us with that. If anything changes, we'll certainly apprise our community. So if there is a positive test, we will notify the Albany County Department of Health immediately. And to be honest, that works both ways. They may know of a positive case before we do, and they will alert us immediately. And that's when we step into action. And our role is not to actually do the contact tracing, but to assist the Department of Health with that work. And we do that by providing them with good information. And I've listed some of the things that we will need to have at our ready fingertips to share with them. So accurate attendance records of staff and students, schedules, log of all visitors, transportation ridership data, and whatever else may be appropriate at that time. I can't stress enough that we are obligated to keep individuals' medical situations confidential. It's required by both state and federal law. However, if we do have a case in a classroom or a building, we will notify faculty and staff as soon as we know. And then we will plan from there, which leads me to our next slide. I've had a lot of questions come in about, so when do you decide to close? And it's a really wonderful question, but it is not a black and white kind of question. In many ways, it would be easier if it were. But we have to consider some key questions if indeed there is going to be a closure. The first is number of cases. Another is, what's the location? Which building is it in? Is it in a section or wing of a building? Is it an individual classroom? How much contact did the individual have with other individuals? So it's possible that we could have a classroom or a hallway or a pod or a wing or a floor, a whole building, or an entire district needing to close. And the metrics for all of that are really going to be determined on a case-by-case basis in close consultation with the Department of Health. I can't say enough how much we appreciate their partnership with us as we work through those very difficult situations. But in the end, as I mentioned at the start of our presentation, the governor has said that if a region in the state has an infection rate that rises over 9%, he will in fact close all of the school districts within that region. Some other safety and health measures, obviously we'll be doing training on proper hand and respiratory hygiene, how to wear facial coverings, social distancing, an update on what symptoms to look for, many symptoms of COVID-19. We'll be doing that with both students and staff. School visitors will be restricted, and if in fact we have visitors, they will need to wear facial coverings and complete the health screening attestation. And then we will be following CDC guidance for cleaning and disinfecting our facilities and our buses. And then another big topic is ventilation. We currently have a ventilation system that operates as it was designed to, and it follows all of the codes that we're required to follow. It's important to know that we have air exchange in our classrooms 4 times an hour, which is I would say a lot. Most spaces don't have air exchanged quite that frequently. We are even looking to see whether or not we can exchange air up to 5 times per hour. I just caution everyone that this is really predicated on the season. The more outside air we bring in the winter, the colder it is. And of course, in the warmer months, the warmer it is. So it's more difficult to maintain comfortable temperatures. There's been a ton of discussion about the filters used in our ventilation systems and the relative merits of a MERV 8 versus a MERV 13, which I'm sure the governor has mentioned in various times. So currently our system calls for MERV 8 filters. We change them 2 times a year minimally. We are currently reviewing MERV 9 and 11 filters, and we just need to make sure that the filter doesn't adversely affect the operation of the unit itself. So we have Mr. Nooney on this call, and I know he's going to talk a little bit more about ventilation later in the program. So I'm going to move on to school schedules. We have been able to flesh this out in a lot more detail, so let me just move to that. Just as an information item to our community, we're going to welcome our faculty and staff back to school on September 1st. We'll use September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd as 3 superintendent's conference days. We're going to use that time to give teachers opportunity to plan and prepare. We'll be doing some training protocols, and we're going to spend as much time as we possibly can doing professional development around remote learning and technology integration. Friday, September 4 will be no school, a day of no school, and faculty and staff will not be reporting. The following week, and this is the change that I signaled to everyone last Friday, we have decided to provide an opportunity for a phased-in start to our school year with 2 goals in mind. First, to provide our students who are entering new buildings for the first time, so our kindergarten, our 5th and 6th grade, and our 8th and 9th grade students, a chance to be in person in their new buildings to get the lay of the land. We are also using this time for our other teachers and other students to have the opportunity for a half day of contact remotely with their classroom and other teachers. This will be an opportunity to do some of that foundational training around social distancing, wearing masks, how the classroom routines will work in this new school environment. So families, you can expect that your K-12 students will have approximately a half day of instruction during September 8, 9, 10, and 11, unless your children are in one of these grades, in which case they will have the opportunity to spend some time in their actual building. And those orientation programs are for our students who are in person. If we have families who are remote for the first semester and are planning or thinking about coming in person starting in February, we will revisit this opportunity to provide some orientation for those children. So I know the building principals are working right now on putting together the schedules for both these remote experiences and the orientations. So please watch for communication from your building principals. So I won't go through this in a ton of detail, but I know we've had lots of questions from our families about when do we drop off, when do we pick up, what's the school day going to look like. So on this first slide, you can see we have K2, 3, 4, and grade 5. Just a reminder that 5th grade will be at Farnsworth Middle School, but their program of study, their teachers will all be from their elementary buildings. Here is the middle school drop-off. You can see grades 6, 7, and 8. Sixth grade will be coming to school daily. You can see the start and end of their day. A reminder that our 7th grade students will be coming in every other day. And that division is not by alphabet, but rather by half of a team will come one day and the other half will come the next. And then our 8th grade students, same plan, except that those students will be housed in the 100 wing of Guilderland High School. And they will have that area pretty much to themselves, so they won't be mingling much with grades 9 through 12 students. And you can see the start and end times. We've also had a lot of requests, well, what will my school day look like? So again, I will invite you to go to our website and look at this in detail, but here is a sample of a 6th grade schedule. You can see that all of the courses that we typically offer are built into the schedule so that our students will have a full experience of 6th grade. Same can be said for 7th grade. And I'll point out that our remote learners will also follow the schedule. And there is our 8th grade schedule. And I'll just point out in the second block down, you see a long period of time, 11:43 to 1:34, that provides for both lunch and day A and B social studies, and days C and D, that's lunch and the science class. And then the high school schedule, grades 9 through 12, there'll be a GHS, excluding the 100 wing. They're every other day by alphabet. And you can see the drop-off day start and the time the day ends. So a couple things about the high school schedule, just to point out. I'm really happy to be able to say that essentially our high school will run the master's schedule that was based on student requests prior to coronavirus. So all scheduled courses will run and be taught in the hybrid model and in the remote model. So students are broken into 2 groups by alphabet. First group is A through K, second group is L through Z, and they'll come to school for instruction every other day. And students will follow their schedule whether they're in school or remote, and attendance is taken for both groups. And then for our 100% remote students, they will be assigned to their class in either a group 1 or a group 2 and follow the schedule for the assigned class. And there you have a sample schedule. You can see in the bottom 2 rows, the alternating group 1, group 2, either face-to-face or remote. And it swings into week 2. And again, all of the courses are available. So I'm going to say a couple words about our instructional programs themselves. We've had lots of questions about what it will look like. And I'm going to start with elementary instruction on site. So students are assigned to grade level teams of teachers and instructional cohorts of about 14 students. Again, that might vary some by number in larger instructional spaces. And to the extent possible, they're going to remain in cohorts throughout the day. They will get their special area instruction, which will push into their classrooms for the amounts of times you see there. Students will participate in physical education, again with that 12 feet social distancing provision, and that'll be twice a week. And then just a reminder, if it isn't clear, grade 5 is at Farnsworth Middle School, but their classrooms are clustered by school and they're taught by their respective teachers from their elementary buildings. If you are remote in K-5, the instructional platform will be Google Classroom or Seesaw. We have designated grade level teachers to provide remote instruction. So teachers whose entire assignment is to provide remote instruction. Part of that will include daily class meetings and then instruction in all content areas. And you can see the breakdown for core areas, special area instruction, and office hours will also be offered. At the middle level, on site for students in grade 6, they attend every day. We still have a house and team structure within the middle school. We still have that middle school model. Again, they're in cohorts of approximately 14 students. Every day will begin with homeroom, and it'll be followed with an 8-period school day. And you can see in the chart on the bottom, under all students, those are the content areas that have been part of our typical 6th grade curriculum for many years. And then off to the right, you see some students will also participate in AIS or special education or get English as a new language support, enrichment, or they may choose to participate in band, chorus, or orchestra. Similar for 7th grade, except they will attend every other day. And also same thing for 8th grade, except again, they'll be at Guilderland High School. So again, you're welcome to visit our website and look at these in more detail. Middle level instruction, remote. Students will follow their daily schedule, includes the same coursework as the students who attend in person. Instruction will be provided by a remote teaching team, kind of similar to what we said at the elementary school, only using the teaming model. The platform will be Google Classroom, and there'll be a blend of live instruction as well as offline activities and assignments to be completed. And again, daily attendance will be taken and student work will be graded using the same system as the students who are in person. In the high school, again, we're striving for class sizes of about 14. Remote students will be part of in-person instruction to the extent that that's practicable. And you'll see a variety of instructional strategies, including live video teaching, pre-recorded video, individual or group Google Meets, Google Meet discussions, documents, project work, independent work, and many others. And just a couple words about special area subjects and activities. We will continue with physical education and performing arts, again, with that 12 feet of physical distance. We can hear more from our instructional administrators for those areas a little bit later. And then extracurricular activities and athletics. This hasn't changed. We're still committed to offering as many as we can, as safely as we can. Extracurricular activities will be conducted virtually when we can. And right now we're still in a holding pattern around interscholastic sports. Still not permitted. The start of the fall season has been delayed until the 21st of September at the very earliest. So, a couple more things about student support services. We just want to point out for our students with IEPs, our students in grades K-6 will receive special ed services as outlined in their IEPs via daily in-person instruction. And the same is true for our 7-12 students, but they'll follow the hybrid model as their peers and then be supported by special education faculty case managers. All K-12 students who attend the district self-contained special education programs will receive daily in-person instruction. However, we know that we do have some families who have opted to participate in remote instruction, and we will be working with them to plan for those and support those children with the services that they need. Another important part of our school community are our learners who are learning English as a new language. And I learned today, and I may call on Marcia Ranieri a little bit to talk more about this, but all of our English language learners will be provided the required units of study based on their most recent proficiency level measurement, whether they are in person or remote. So important to point out, we will be serving our ENL students. It's been a priority for us to have daily in-person learning for our ENL students, especially those who may have some special challenges. But again, we understand that families may have made a choice to have their children fully remote, in which case we will support them over that venue. And then just also want to point out that we'll be making every possible effort to translate our documents for families who speak one of our 10 most used languages in the district. And I'll also just remind everyone that we have a wonderful translation feature on our website right at the top of the screen. So anything on our website can be translated into one of many languages. And then probably never in our lifetime if we felt the need so strongly to have social emotional supports, not only for our children, but also for our adults. This is a time of tremendous stress and uncertainty, and we need to attend to those needs. So the district will be making available resources and referrals to address mental health, behavioral, and emotional needs of students, faculty, and staff. It's a top priority. If people are not feeling settled, it's really, really hard to be concentrating on learning and instruction. So it's a top priority for us. Our Social Emotional Learning Advisory Subcommittee has many recommendations that are included in our reopening plan. Just a couple of them include time for teachers to develop relationships with students. That's part of what we're hoping for in our opening transitional days of September 8th through 11th. They've also planned some professional development activities for our faculty and staff. And they'll also be reviewing and revising our K-12 comprehensive counseling plan, which is a document that guides us in these matters. And then we also want to provide families with information on how to prepare children to return to school. And we just have ready to publish on our website a helpful document with lots of suggestions on what to expect when you return to school and how do you prepare to learn for school, return to school. It's user-friendly, family-friendly tips for everything from social distancing and hand washing and greetings and mask wearing, and it's very well done. And then a couple words about our non-instructional support services. We have lots of questions about transportation. Just a reminder that everybody on the bus needs to wear a face covering. That's students, drivers, attendants. Very important. And we will maintain social distancing to the extent practical. We understand that it's not strictly 6 feet. School buses are only 7 feet wide. So we're just going to do the best that we can, which is why wearing the face covering is so critical. We have a 1 child per seat rule, except for siblings. They can, in fact, sit together. And we have planned for approximately 20 students per bus. We've staggered our bus runs in order to make that 20 student per bus total possible at K2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 12. And then buses will be cleaned and disinfected once a day. And then high contact spots will be wiped down after morning and afternoon runs. And last, I think, but not last but not least is lunch. Everyone's always worried about lunch. It's very important. And we have Megan Beck on the call with us tonight, but just some highlights. Students will be eating in their classrooms, and they will be picking up plated and limited touch items from the cafeteria. I understand we have trays with lids to keep down spillage. Students are going to be able to pre-order what they'd like using our school cafe system. That's at the middle and high school. And we'll be using a Google Sheet at the elementary schools to gather those orders. No cash at the register. We're going to continue to use our online payment. And then students will be required to and reminded to wash and sanitize their hands prior to eating lunch. And for our students who have elected to be fully remote for instruction, they too will be able to get meals. They will be available for pickup from either Farnsworth or Guilderland on Mondays. So that's the end of all of the new information. We have several questions that came in since we advertised this evening's event, and we're going to turn our attention to those questions in just a second here. So I want to thank you for those questions and, of course, your patience as we do our best to put together a quality learning experience for your children during this time. So just a reminder, we'll work through as many questions as we can. Many of the questions were similar but worded differently, so we will cluster them together in ways that make sense. However, as you're listening, if you have additional questions you don't hear answers to, there is the address that you can send it to now. It's reopening@guilderlandschools.net, and Amy Pera is on this call watching that account, so she can assist as we get to the end with any additional questions. So I'm going to say thank you for joining us, and I'll turn off the PowerPoint and go back to my colleagues and begin some discussion around topics of interest to all of you. All right, do I still have all of you? All right, thumbs up. All right, so I have a printed copy of the many questions that came up. And where I'd like to start is probably the topic or topics that really were of keen interest to our families. And that is, so what will remote instruction look like? So Dr. Singleton, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to ask our principals and other instructional administrators to chime in so our families can get a feel what this will look like when we're back to school. So go ahead, Dr. Singleton.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Wiles. Well, you stole quite a bit of my thunder in your presentation, and you touched upon a number of topics related to remote learning. But just to give the community and staff and students an update, as of today, we have about 78% of our students have opted to be in person, and about 22% have pursued the remote learning option. So I won't reiterate all that you said in the presentation, but I will just share and kind of elaborate on a couple of key points around the delivery of remote learning or virtual learning. As we've worked with our task forces for instruction, that has been one of the big questions about what is the best methodology to deliver content and deliver instruction to students who would be learning at home. And quite frankly, our conclusion was there's not just one way to do it. There are actually multiple approaches and multiple modes of delivering instruction to students who are at home. So we fully anticipate that our teachers are going to be planning from a blend of approaches. And the blend will likely include some live or synchronous learning that is facilitated directly by the classroom teacher. That may be live streaming of a lesson that a teacher is delivering to the students who are in front of him or her at that given time. But there will also be a blend of some offline activities, some things that are asynchronous in nature. There might be some activities or projects, some readings, some assignments that would be completed by students while they are at home. In some instances, again, we may be streaming directly with live lessons, but we may also be delivering some pre-recorded lessons. So teachers who are finding comfort in being able to deliver their content by pre-recording, being able to vet that recording and deliver that at home is another approach to that. There's also a screencasting option. So for example, if we chose to, we could do a screencasting during this presentation tonight if we wished to. Screencasting is basically where a teacher is able to display what is on their computer screen as they are delivering instruction, and we have multiple tools by which teachers can do that. One that was used quite a bit in the spring was called Loom. So the primary difference, I would say, from the spring, and that is a question that I've heard quite a bit, is that our students will be following our full curriculum. At the spring, we did have to abbreviate some things or prioritize some things, but we are expecting the delivery of our full curriculum to those students who are remote throughout the fall months and potentially longer. This means that there will be science and social studies delivered at the elementary level. Art, PE, and music are still required as well. But I do want to be very clear about a couple of the limitations that come with remote or virtual learning. I think it's very fair to say, and I hope most people understand, that it is really impossible to completely replicate an in-person class with remote learning. Instruction, teaching, learning are not just delivery of content. It's not just direct teacher instruction. The in-person, the classroom environment is rich with conversation and collaboration. It's cooperative in nature, and to the greatest degree that we possibly can, our teachers will strive to make sure those students who are at home are engaged in those manners. But it's not easy, and it's not the same thing. And I think we have to just recognize that as we go into the remote learning experience for, again, the 22% of our students. So we obviously have some differences by level as well. Grade level, our expectations for K through 5 are going to be a little bit different than what we see at the middle and at the high school. I can tell you at all of our levels, though, our teachers who will be delivering remote instruction will be Guilderland teachers. They will be New York State certified teachers within their respective areas. One very important development, I would say, at the elementary level that we do want parents to understand is that as we have collected the numbers or the choices around in-person versus remote learning for families, it has become very difficult for us to assign teachers solely from their home catchment or from their home school. So our elementary principals actually worked throughout the afternoon today to try to develop remote classes, essentially, or remote cohorts, but those remote cohorts might be a blend of students from multiple buildings, and that's important to point out. Largely because of the numbers and how they played out at each grade level and what we had available for staffing to accommodate those remote classes. We have, and again, I won't reiterate everything that Dr. Wiles said, but we fully anticipate that we'll be providing reading instruction, writing instruction, math, social studies, science. Our special area classes will be delivered as well. We do not expect our students to be online or staring at a screen for 6 hours continually every day. I think we recognize that that is certainly not healthy, number one, but there are diminishing returns with that. We observed that in the spring months, actually, as we started to recognize that the longer students were engaged with remote learning, we started to see stamina become an issue, and students were starting to kind of drift away a little bit and become a little bit detached from the screen, and understandably so. So finding the appropriate balance between the screen time in remote instruction and then the asynchronous opportunities for our students is really going to be very important and will be at the forefront of the thinking and the planning for our teachers. So that, I would say, is in a nutshell what we're looking at right now for remote instruction. Again, I'll reiterate, though, that we will be following schedules at each level. So you saw some sample schedules for middle school, high school, elementary school. And I would then turn, if any of my high school, middle school, or elementary colleagues have anything to add to that at this point, but that is an overview of what we're looking at for remote right now.
Alan, anything you want to add from the elementary perspective?
I think Dr. Singleton explained things pretty well. You know, we are just really busy right now making up our plans for our cohorts, both our in-person and remote learners.
Mr. Laster, middle school?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Lockwood and Dr. Singleton. I mean, I think the explanation was well done, and we anticipate the 7th grade experience every other day to be as described. I think there's going to be a combination of different delivery models on the day that the students are remote, and frankly, I'm excited. I'm excited at the potential for our teachers and staff to integrate technology into teaching and learning in ways that we have not done. So I'm excited for our teachers to provide experiences for our 7th and 8th grade remote learners that are going to be robust and meaningful. So
Great. Mr. Piscatelli, what about the high school?
I thought Dr. Singleton did a great job describing what we were going to do. The only thing I would add is we're going to expect students to follow their schedule. So when their class is meeting, that's kind of when we want them to engage in the remote learning. We got to figure out how we're going to take attendance during those blocks, but that's part of the conversations we're having right now. And really, the instructional strategies we're using, that list that Dr. Singleton went through, a lot of it's going to be based on what's the lesson objective at that moment, what's the topic that we're covering, and in a lot of respects too, the content areas that we're talking about. So that's basically all I would add at this point.
So are we going to be recording any students while they're online?
So, no, I mean, that question has come up quite a bit, and the answer is a pretty firm no. The reason it's a firm no is because at any point, if we record any live instruction with our students, it becomes a part of a student's record, which basically conflicts with a law called FERPA, or the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act. So we're very cognizant of the legal parameters and the restrictions that we have when we engage our learners remotely, and recording is really not something that we want to see happening.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Knowles, do you want to say a little bit about how we will serve students with disabilities during our reopening, particularly if they happen to be in a remote setting?
Well, certainly whether we're in person or remote, our special ed services will be achieved by using the variety of resources previously mentioned. Every one of our students with an IEP has a case manager, typically a special education teacher, that is assigned to them to make sure their IEP is implemented. Staff are aware of accommodations and modifications that are required in the IEP. We're going to ensure that their educational materials are accessible and adapted or modified as appropriate for each of the students, and our providers will be working collaboratively with their general education partners to ensure delivery of instruction.
Thank you. Ms. Ranieri, what about serving our ENL students? How will that look remotely and in person?
Sure. So our ENL students are going to be serviced along with their classroom teacher. So part of their day will be meeting with the classroom. Part of their day may be meeting with the ENL teacher. Most of the time our ENL teachers push in. So you can't really tell who's an ENL student and who's not. So the ENL teacher sometimes services all students. And it's a beneficial service for all, really.
And for the remote, will it look just the same?
And for remote, they'll have a schedule, and during the day they'll meet with their classroom teacher for part of it, and then they'll have a scheduled block of time where they'll meet with the ENL class and the ENL teacher so that they'll be able to have those ENL services provided.
Great, thank you. Mr. Winans, why don't we talk about, not PE, we'll save that for Mr. Austin, but art and music. Those will look a little bit different in the opening of this school year, won't they?
Well, in terms of remote learning, I know a big question out there is about instrumental lessons. And I want to stress that instrumental lessons will take place grades 4 through 12. And then we have vocal lessons also at the high school. So they will take place 9 through 12 vocal lessons. So both remote and in-person students will have their normal rotational lesson every week. So that's something important to make the distinction on, because there's been several questions regarding, especially with fourth graders, should I cancel my instrumental rental agreement that I signed up for? Should I still rent the instrument? And the answer is yes, we are still going to be providing instrumental lessons 4 through 12, and then vocal lessons in grades 9 through 12. In terms of how remote looks in other formats, it's going to depend on the class, whether it's an ensemble, whether or not it's a class like AP Music Theory or Music Theory and Composition, some of those smaller classes. they might do things differently in terms of synchronous and asynchronous learning.
Great, thank you. Mr. Austin, what about physical education? What will that look like in the fall?
Well, different for sure. In-person phys ed, as you discussed earlier, we are going to be adhering to the recommended physical distancing guidelines. So we'll be, utilizing field paint when we're outside to mark off grids to ensure physical distancing between students. When we're inside, we'll be using poly spots and cones. We will space ourselves out as much as we possibly can. And as far as the activities that we'll be doing activities that little to no contact, little to no equipment sharing. So we're going to have to get creative, and so it will certainly look different. And remote learning, as discussed earlier, certainly going to be more live instruction, more human to human connection. I know the teachers talked about how they missed the students last spring during the first go around with remote learning. But we're exploring multiple approaches, looking at different ways to engage students at home with activities that can be done at home with limited to no equipment. I know there's some software that we're looking at. There's some athletic training software. There's a website that has a number of on-demand classes with interactive videos. So it will look different for sure, phys ed, but we're excited to embark on COVID PE here in September.
So, Mr. Austin, I know we've had some questions about mask wearing in PE outside when students are doing things that require exertion. How will that work?
So students, they're going to be required to wear masks as they enter the phys ed classroom and as they exit the phys ed classroom. They will have them on for the most part during instruction, but as I mentioned earlier, there will certainly be times in the lesson where we will be distanced at least 12 feet apart. And like I said, we will, we'll get creative with how we do that with field marking, paint, cones, poly spots. And at those times in the lessons when we know we're at 12 feet or more, we will certainly leave it up to the discretion of the teachers, whether or not they feel that the activity is appropriate to have the students take their mask off for. So the way I see it is, we will be at 12 feet or more as much as we possibly can. And when we can, we will certainly have the students take the masks off if we feel like that's appropriate.
All right, great, thank you.
And if I could just jump in, talking about masks for singing and instrumental wind instruments. The recommended distance is 12 feet for singing and for wind instruments. We will be using the 12-foot spacing, the recommended distance, and we will also be requiring masks for singing and for playing wind instruments. We're looking into purchasing special masks that would allow us to do that, as well as bell covers for the instruments. So going above and beyond the recommended safety guidelines.
Great, that's awesome. So panel, is there anything from an instructional perspective that we haven't talked about yet that you think would be important for our families to know at this point?
Yes. I would just like our elementary parents to understand that as we develop these cohorts that their children will likely not be assigned to a classroom teacher. They will be a part of a grade level team in most of the buildings. And we do have some opportunities in some buildings to keep one class with one teacher, but predominantly they're going to be working with grade level teams, and teachers are going to specialize in different content areas and move around through the cohorts each at that grade level to provide instruction in specific areas. So there may be a second grade teacher who specializes in math instruction, and another second grade teacher who specializes in reading instruction, and another in writing instruction. And they will rotate around and work with all of the students at that grade level to provide instruction in their specific area. So it's going to be a little different. You won't have the one classroom teacher that your child's assigned to, but rather the grade level team.
Thanks for adding that, Alan. That's a good point to make. So at this point, let's transition to some of the questions that we've had around health and safety and our facilities and transportation and lunch, all of the other aspects of our school operations that make school school. And I'm going to start with the most basic, and that's air. Because we've had lots of questions about airflow and the ventilation systems within our buildings. So Mr. Nooney, I'm going to turn to you. Can you help us understand better than I explained before how the air ventilation systems work within our buildings and whether or not we can use fans and how we keep a healthy airflow environment in our classrooms?
See, you did pretty well, Dr. Wiles, and how you explained it. And my new imaginary friend's name is Merv. So, but I put some information out to staff, and we could probably put more up on our website for our community. Each classroom is pretty much an independent system. It's controlled by a building management system that we schedule classes in blocks. So each HVAC unit has an outside air damper that we bring in outside air. It also has what they call a phase bypass damper, which we recirculate air in a classroom. We typically, most spaces turn over air 4 times per hour. Some are a little less, some are a little more. We can increase that by controlling our outside air damper to a more open position. So say if it's set at 15%, we can run it at 25%. That is a seasonal approach. One of the things from the Department of Health was to increase our outside airflow as much as possible. The last thing I want to do is to install filters that are going to inhibit that, and also filters that honestly have not been proven to filter out COVID-19 either. So we're continuing to look at MERV 9 and MERV 11, which would be an increase of over the MERV 8s we have now. It may be a seasonal approach. I am kind of feeling out what other districts are doing, actually talking to our filter supplier to see what other districts are doing. And when I say seasonal approach, because I've already stepped on my toes by answering questions in too many spots of what exactly we are doing and aren't doing. We may start off with all 9s at the start of school because we can run our dampers at a higher percentage open and more airflow. As we transition to heating season and we're recirculating more air in a classroom, we'd still be turning over 4 times per hour at a minimum. We would maybe transition to an 11. This is still a work in progress with a lot of hype that's all over the place on different outlets. As far as fans, we can use fans. I kind of had a conversation, if we can open a window and let the wind blow in, I do not see why we cannot allow fans in our classrooms. And we'll have that conversation with staff tomorrow. I think it's part of how we point the fans. You don't point a fan necessarily right in somebody's face who's sitting next to somebody else, but maybe a box fan in a window actually drawing air out of the classroom. So I do think that will be allowed. One of the questions of like UV technology, stuff like that, SED facilities planning is not allowing any ion generators, UV lighting, any of those technologies to be used in our classroom spaces or any of our units. They're not proven and not proven to be safe. I think that sums up HVAC for now. It's still a work in progress.
Well, we appreciate your ongoing homework on this topic. We actually had a question where a community member was worried about leaving our doors open and unmonitored throughout buildings in order to increase airflow. Want to comment on that, Mr. Nooney?
That will not be done. I mean, we still have security protocols at all our buildings that we will adhere to at the start of school. We will be adjusting. I'll be working with all our principals as far as we'll be changing our unlock times, and because we have different start times now, but we will not be opening our outside doors or jeopardizing our security protocols for airflow. No.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Mrs. Wagerman, I'm going to move to you for the worst case scenario. So everyone is worried, and I understand why. And so what happens if we have a student or a staff member who exhibits one of the many, many symptoms that are associated with COVID-19? Can you kind of walk through the process of what happens?
Sure. So what we're going to do is that person would be directed to come to the nurse's office, and the nurse would greet that person. And if they presented with symptoms of COVID-19, they would be taken to our isolation room. And, you know, certainly if it's a student, parents will be notified. One of the questions that keeps coming up is if a student screens positive for one of those symptoms, what is the return policy, the return to school policy going to be? And so I'm just going to read through just a little bit here. According to New York State Department of Health, students who screen positive for COVID symptoms can return to school based on the following, but it must include at a minimum these three things: documentation from a healthcare provider following evaluation, a negative COVID-19 diagnostic test result, and symptom resolution, or if COVID positive, a release from isolation. So we are currently working on interpreting these guidelines and how best to apply them in school. And so one of the things that will be happening this week is on Friday, we will be meeting with the New York State Department of Health, well, I guess it's Albany County Department of Health Commissioner, Dr. Weiland, to talk with her about these guidelines and just to be clear on exactly what is needed for a student to return to school. Because as you can imagine, the symptoms of COVID are wide ranging. And you know, there's been a lot of questions about this. You know, if my child has a sore throat, or if my child has just a GI upset. So we're going to work closely to get that, you know, come into compliance with what they need from us. So that's what our focus is.
All right, thank you, Mary. Also related to safety is the whole process of getting children from home to school, whether it's by bus or in their family car, and then from the car into the building. So we have lots of questions about transportation in general, and then drop off and pick up as well. So I'm gonna start, I see we have our Director of Transportation on the line, Danielle Poirier. Danielle, can you talk with us about how children will be kept safe on buses? We talked a little bit about wearing masks. Can you say more about social distancing and the cleaning and disinfecting of buses?
Well, as you said earlier, Dr. Wiles, we're going to have 20 students per bus, perhaps a few more if we have siblings that can sit together. They will be required to wear the masks. In between runs, when practicable, we will be wiping the high touch areas such as the handrails and the tops of the seats with disinfecting wipes. And in the middle of the day, we will be using electrostatic sprayers with a disinfectant spray to spray the entire inside of the bus. And that solution sits on the surface and dries within 4 minutes. And that disinfects the bus. The loading and unloading procedures are going to be very strict, so to speak. The first student on goes to the back, next student on goes to the opposite back seat, and we move forward as they're getting on. And in the afternoon, the first student that will be getting off will be in the front seat, so they don't have to keep passing by each other, the students, as they're getting on and off.
So kind of like an airplane in the days before zones, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay, very good. So we recently surveyed families and gave them the opportunity to opt out of transportation if they prefer to drive their children to school. And we did have quite a few families who do that. So there's some concern about traffic at all of our buildings. So Mr. Sanders, can I turn to you? Can you talk with us a little bit about what the district is doing to plan for orderly drop off and pick up at the start of school?
Sure, Dr. Wiles. Just to remind everybody, we do have a healthy dose of parent drop-off and pickups now with our regular runs. So we're used to that and managing that at our various buildings. Obviously, we will have lighter loaded buses and more parent participation in terms of drop-off and pickup. But also out of those opt-outs for transportation, some of those students are going to be selecting, or families are going to be selecting remote-only learning, so they won't contribute to traffic at the school buildings. The other factor is we're staggering start times and dismissal times at the lower grade levels. So that will actually result in half of the traffic that we might normally have if everybody were to arrive at the same time. But we recognize that it will be an issue and a challenge. We've had conversations already with the Guilderland Police Department about assisting us in evaluating the sites, looking at traffic patterns, seeing if we need to make any modifications to improve that. Also wanting to make them aware of the increased school traffic that we might have at certain buildings at certain times and what that might mean on our area roadways. So we want to have that proactive conversation with them, trying to plan what we can do to help limit the impact of that. We'll also look at how we circulate traffic through the various buildings and might be making some changes for parent drop off and pickup in terms of traffic patterns. The other thing is we're looking at a card system, particularly at the elementary school level, which will allow us to more quickly match a parent with a child. So as we have waiting traffic, parent can display a card. We will know that who that parent or guardian is associated with, be able to get that child and reunite them quickly so we can keep traffic moving. So that's another initiative we're undertaking as well.
So it sounds like communication with parents once we have these plans will be critical so they know what it will look like when they bring their child to school in the morning and pick up in the afternoon.
That's correct.
So Amy, my next question is going to be for you. I'm going to surprise you, but I've noticed we have a question about school supply lists. And I know that's always a much anticipated, almost as much as anticipated as who will my teacher be. Can you give us an update on where we are with supply lists?
Sure, at least for the elementary level, they are all posted with the exception of Pine Bush Elementary on the website. And the schools, individual schools themselves will be sending those out to the parents as well. Additional supply lists are coming once I think there's more of a more idea of like class placements and things like that. So we at least have most of the elementary supply lists on the website with the exception of Pine Bush, which is almost done.
So our families can visit the site and figure out what they need to gather. Couple other questions. We had a question about our school day, which looks very different, particularly at the high school. It's a late start and a late end. And some of that is a function of transportation and going to not 3, but 4 tiers. So Danielle, let me put you back on the spot again. If you can just, explain for our community how we landed at those 4 tiers and expanded our days to as it has been.
Well, it all really revolves around the capacity of what we can put on the bus. When we decided that 20 was the number, 1 student per seat, we had to work backwards and, figure out how, if we wanted to keep the same schedule, we would have had to have additional staff, additional buses. Buses cost a lot of money and we can't find the staff. So that's how we ended up with the schedule that we have.
Okay. So Mr. Austin, we get a lot of questions about athletics. And as I pointed out, and as you well know, they're on hold for right now, but is a eternal optimist if we are eventually back with our interscholastic sports program. What's your thinking about how that will affect our student athletes if we're not done with school till 4:15?
I think we're going to have to be creative, and we haven't gotten to that conversation yet. Obviously, priority number one is the reopening of schools, and Danielle's got her hands full, I'm sure, with figuring out the transportation plan. So I think in short answer, we've got to get creative. We've got to be flexible. I think maybe practices. If sports do return on September 21st, we'll probably shift most of them to the 4:30 to 6 o'clock time slot. But obviously, daylight becomes a factor as we get into October. I know there was a question about, is it possible for practices to be held before school? And I think to that question, I think it's possible that some sports practices could be held before the start of school, but that's dependent on the coach's availability. And many of our coaches are teachers, and it's possible, even though their school day starts, the students start at, maybe 10 o'clock. That doesn't necessarily mean the teachers aren't in earlier. So, I think in short, we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be flexible. Those are, I think, if we can get sports off the ground on September 21st, those are smaller problems in the grand scheme of things. Those are logistical things that, we will figure out answers to. We will make it work.
Great. Thank you, Dave. One more logistical question before I check in with Amy to see if we have any more. We had a number of questions about bandwidth because we have so many students who are likely to be on devices and teachers doing live streaming and so on. Damien, do we have enough bandwidth to do everything we described at the top of this hour?
We do. We have been monitoring our bandwidth for years, and we have, number one, we've increased it each year for the past 2 or 3 years. And we've never, even when we're fully in session, we've never really maxed out our bandwidth. We had a call yesterday with our regional information center. And just for the lay people out there, our regional information center is basically the pipe through which our internet connections run. At this point, from their perspective, we are perfectly okay. However, just to be safe, we will be turning up the dial on our bandwidth to max it out at the start of the school year. We do have to pay for that, so it's an additional cost, but we will be turning it up, and we'll be monitoring it as we see the traffic go to and from our schools. If by some chance it looks like we're not using what we have turned it up to, we can always turn it back down and lower the cost for the school district. But while we're on this topic, though, I do think it's very important that people understand that bandwidth is just one variable in the transmission of data and traffic through the internet. There are many places where you can have bottlenecks in that traffic, and it's not all due to bandwidth. Some of it is in our control. Some of it is absolutely not in our control. So as I said, the internet connections run directly through NARIC, or the Regional Information Center. So that's a potential bottleneck. In all honesty, Google is a potential bottleneck. So as we utilize the Google platforms, we're operating largely off of Google servers, or the cloud, basically. So believe it or not, there are times when you have bottlenecks at that end. There could be bottlenecks within Wi-Fi connections. So if we have too many devices connecting to one wireless access point, for example, you could run into some issue, although our high school has been fully updated, so we're in good shape, our middle school as well, and our system is designed so that if you overtax or have too many connections to one access point, that the connections are routed to the next available access point. So we believe that internally we're in very good shape. Again, bandwidth should not be an issue, but technology is technology. And anytime you have traffic of information and data going over the internet, there are many places where you can have delays or performance issues. It's not just a bandwidth issue, but at this point, we're fine.
What about sufficient numbers of devices?
Yeah, so this is a challenge. As we know, for all of our students from grades 5 through 12 will be given their own device. So we are fully covered at grades 5 through 12. Right now, we have enough devices to cover all of our students who will be in person. We have to remember this is a little bit different than the spring, because in the spring, all students went home, which meant that we could basically tear apart all of our computer carts and start distributing devices to students who were going home. At grades K through 4, we believe we have enough devices at this point in time. However, if there are families who have opted for the remote learning, we are really strongly requesting and urging them to use their own devices to the greatest extent possible. Largely because devices that we would send home, number one, are going to be of very old generation devices, but number two, we at this point are going to be very stretched in the availability of those devices, because we still have to serve kids in school as well. The other complicating factor, and pretty much every district is encountering this at this point, because every district is placing massive orders of Chromebooks and tablets and all kinds of devices to accommodate online and remote learning, is that there are significant delays in deliveries. So we are awaiting delivery of devices for all of our K1 students, which would be tablet type devices. We also have 900 Chromebooks that we're awaiting delivery on, but it's appearing that we will not receive them until October. So there will be a delay. But at this point, again, I think we have enough devices, but if parents who have opted for remote could help us out a little bit and try to use personal devices at home, that would be greatly appreciated. Of course, if there is hardship, we will absolutely do everything necessary to make sure that students have those devices and are connected.
Perfect. Last but not least on the list of questions, what about lunch? Megan Beck, can you help our families understand how lunch will work this year?
Absolutely. So we are running a variety of models for lunch. If students are in person, they are in our district, they will be getting lunch in their classrooms. Dependent on the school that they're in, it will depend on if it's being delivered to their classroom, if they will have to go down and get it. As Dr. Wiles mentioned, we do have lids for trays to limit our spilling of food in the hallways. So kids will be eating in the classrooms. I'm working with all of our school nurses to make sure allergy sensitive kids are taken care of, are covered, and are safe in the rooms that they are in. So parents, please don't worry about that. For 7-12 students who are on the hybrid model, when they leave school that afternoon to go home for the day that they will be home, they will have an opportunity to pick up breakfast and lunch for the following day when they leave. If they're leaving on a Friday, they'll have an opportunity to pick up breakfast and lunch for that Monday. And then students that are fully remote can also have an opportunity to have meals from the school district. They need to email me. We also have a link to a Google form that we will put on our reopening plan. You can fill out the Google form. It will get you signed up for lunches. You will come through. We'll have pickup on Monday at Gilderland High School and Farnsworth. Come up and you'll pick up your full week of meals at that time. At the moment, we are accepting free and reduced applications. If you qualify for free and reduced meals, any of the models that you are on, your meals will be free or reduced. If you are a paid family, any model that you are on, you will have to pay for your meals. As Dr. Wiles mentioned, we are limiting cash at the register. If you need to send in cash for your student, we're asking that you send it in a marked envelope to their teacher, and it will come down to the classroom, so it's not handled at the register and we're not giving change at the register. We're also serving breakfast in the classroom this year, so students are entitled to a breakfast while they're unpacking during morning meeting, and those will also be pre-ordered, and more information on the ordering systems will be coming out within the next week.
All right, thank you so much. Amy, did we have any new questions come in while we were talking?
We did. We have quite a few, so I don't think we're going to get to all of them. So bear with me if I'm firing these out to everybody, okay? So since we had Megan, I just want to confirm that anybody that is remote, it is still paid unless you are on the free and reduced program.
Correct. So if you are remote, if you're a paid student, you do need to pay for your lunches. You can prepay for them online, and we will take care of all the charging on the back end. If you are entitled to free or reduced, there is no charge.
Okay, so then for the orientation days and the phase days for those students that are coming in, are school buses going to run, or do I have to drive my child?
Yes, there will be school buses available.
But for kindergarten, Alan,
Yeah.
you're gonna have families, parents come with their kindergarten children, right?
Yeah, we're working the plans out for that right now, but our kindergarten teachers are very interested in talking with the parents, making sure that they're fully comfortable with the transportation plans and have had the opportunity to address any issues or concerns that parents may have. So we are planning to invite parents, which means that parents will bring the students in.
Actually, Alan, while we have you, it might be good for this one. It said, you mentioned that remote learners may be mixed with students from other elementary schools. Will at minimum be with the children from their own elementary school who are remote?
Yes, we were, as I said, working on that rather feverishly today. And at this point in time, when we have mixed school cohorts, there are children that are mixed from only 2 schools. So there may be a cohort with 11 students from this school and 15 students from another school. So they still will have familiar faces with them.
Okay, with the grade level teams that are remote, will they still receive the same curriculum as the in-person students?
Yes, they will still receive the exact same curriculum that they typically would have. And as we rotate around, that will also be opportunities when a classroom teacher is not directly with a cohort. That may be the opportunity when the E&L teacher is pushing in to provide services to those students, or a special education teacher may be providing services at that time as well. And there may be other times when the teacher isn't directly in there that we have a monitor or a teaching assistant covering a classroom, and that may be recess time or some quiet work time when the teaching assistant can support some students with some remediation.
Okay, this one is on accelerated learning. What courses, support, and activities will be available for accelerated learning students?
Is this 8th graders, perhaps?
This 8th grade acceleration?
Yeah, it sounds like it. So our accelerated 8th grade students who will be located at Guilderland High School will participate in the algebra program and the biology program, just like they would have participated at FMS. It will be taught by their FMS 8th grade team teachers, just like they were located at FMS.
Okay, can we just get another confirmation of the percentage of the student body that chose remote learning?
Right now, we're at about 22%.
22%, okay.
Damien, I just recalculated. It actually went to 22.7. So in the presentation we're giving tomorrow to staff, I put 23. So in the interest of full disclosure and accuracy.
You're very precise.
I try to be.
Do we have some time? Take another minute?
We could do maybe one more.
Oh, well, this is a lot of pressure. Basically, it's about, what the plan is when January comes around. I've seen a couple of those come in. How will you accommodate all the remote learners if they want to return in person in January?
So that's a big question, one that we've been pondering quite a bit. I think one very important point to make is that there is not a guarantee that the students who return will be returning to the same teacher that they had in the remote experience. In fact, that's probably unlikely. So there will be a transition to a new student. I think there's still a lot that we don't know that we're going to have to monitor regarding social distance requirements, the state of the infection regionally, all of those things. But certainly once we start reintroducing additional bodies into our classrooms, We are going to have to monitor that very closely to make sure that we are able to remain in compliance with those social distance requirements. And that was one of the reasons why we really felt it was important for parents to commit to a semester of being remote if they wish to go in that direction. You know, there's a lot, I would say it's a little early to say exactly how that's going to play out. But we do know that, you know, students who return will likely be assigned to a different teacher or a different class upon their return. And then we'll have to see how it will inevitably be surveying parents to get a sense of how many will be returning so we can plan accordingly and make sure that we are in compliance with safety requirements.
And Amy, let me just add, I had a question or a comment about, is it possible to think differently about moving grade levels, 5th grade to the middle school, 8th grade to the high school, given the fact that 22 or 23% of our students aren't going to physically be here? And one of the reasons why we need to stay with those plans is for this very eventuality, that we need to, the whole plan was based on having 6 feet of space for all 5,000 of our students. So we need to plan for that. So we do have the 6 feet space if all of our children wanted to come back. All right. For those who sent some additional questions in, we'll absolutely take a look at them. We may be able to respond to them in one of our subsequent programs. Again, we'll be doing a similar program at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and also at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening. In the meantime, I would like to, first of all, thank our community members who tuned in tonight. I hope this was helpful. Hope we were able to answer many of your questions. I also want to thank everybody who was on the panel tonight for spending some time and sharing your thinking on these very complex questions about how we safely reopen our schools here in Guilderland. So any words of wisdom from anyone on our call here? Hearing none, I will just reiterate one more time. Thank you everyone for being a part of this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.